Hello everyone, this is part 8 of What If Naruto Got a New Teacher After Training Trip, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. She didn't understand what was going on. There were no defects when she used the seal on Toma, but the chakra began to seep out of Naruto. She sat alone in her room at the desk, drawings and writing notes on what had happened. The chakra that had seeped out of Naruto when he fought Guy was very unusual, and she had a very bad feeling about it. She had sent a letter to Tsunade describing it the day of and one to Suna. She had received a reply from both nations saying Gaara was doing the same things, and Tsunade gave her the results of what it could be. The demons were trying to fight back, and they were stealing chakra from within their containers. What am I supposed to do? This didn't happen with Toma only because his demon didn't fight back, she whispers and thinks for a moment. If I were to make another seal see the chakra supply from the demon but not from the container, she began to draw figures and hand signs that were related to the jutsu she used on the boys. Before long she was so involved with her work that she had forgotten about the time, and it was already dark out. She groaned and got to her feet while stretching, thinking about how her day went by so quickly. Then she decided to take a walk and disappeared into the town. Hinata smiles as she watches Toma and Naruto train outside. It was dark, but they could see perfectly from a light jutsu that Toma had used. Neji and Lee had gone inside unaware of the night training that the other three were doing. Toma, you need to block your center better, Hinata says as she watches with her Byakugan. Toma nods quickly as he begins to block his center from Naruto's oncoming attacks. Naruto, you need to put more chakra into your left, it's getting a little weak, Hinata says, and Naruto obeys, increasing his chakra. What are you guys doing? Neji walks up behind Hinata and watches Naruto and Toma exchange blows once more. Training? We have night training also, Hinata says without looking up at Neji. She notices another opening, but this time in Naruto's stance. Naruto, right side, she calls, and he quickly blocks his right side before Toma can plant a fist in it. I see she's changed both of you in such little time, Neji says as he sits next to Hinata with his arms folded across his chest. You don't even seem like the person you used to be, Hinata-sama. Well, what can I say? I mean, she's been like the mother I never had. Hinata smiles sadly off into space. Neji watches closely, watching Hinata's sadness in her eyes, but she sheds no tears. Hinata-sama, I don't know what to say to you at a time like this. You may have changed, but I know that kind person everyone back in Konoha loves is in there, Neji says, and she looks at him smiling warmly. Neji-ni-san, she never left me. She may have gotten stronger and a little more tough, but she's still here, she says softly to her cousin, ignoring what's going on with Toma and Naruto. Before Neji can say anything back in reply, they hear a thud from where Toma and Naruto were. What happened? She gasps and quickly begins to heal him as she looks up at Naruto. His eyes are like the demons, but instead of red, the dark orange. Naruto-kun, she whispers and slowly rises to her feet when Toma's healed. Neji-ni-san, please take Toma inside where it's safe and find Dasara-sensei. She whispers and watches Naruto closely as Naruto's eyes focus on Neji and Toma as Neji carries them away. He goes to chase after them, but Hinata blocks his way. He looks up at Hinata's face and growls lightly. Naruto-kun, calm down, she whispers. Stop calling me that, Naruto growls, his voice that of the demon foxes. Hinata watches closely as Naruto smirks and the 9 tails of chakra emerge from behind him. The tails lash out and break rocks, trees, and make cracks in the ground. I am the Kyuubi, I've been sealed away for so long I've decided to come out and play. He cracks his knuckles and looks her up and down, looking over her features and then at her curves. I see why the kid picked you. The body of an angel, Naruto smirks and Hinata growls lightly, balling her hands into fists at her side. Shut up and return Naruto-kun right now, she says without hesitation or fear of the fox. He smirks and folds his arms across his chest. So confident and fearless, I'm growing to like you more and more, would you like to be my mate instead? The fox says as he reaches a hand out to touch her face, but she smacks it away. Feisty aren't we? She places her fingers on the new C from his hand being knocked back and his nails out. Yes, and you'll return Naruto this instant or you'll see how angry I can get also. Hinata says, and the fox smirks at her comment. The fox laughs a deep and low laugh while tilting his head back, then he stops and brings his gaze down to her angry eyes. We'll see how angry you can get. He disappears and Hinata activates her Byakugan and looks around, but out of nowhere the fox appears behind her and one of his hands now rests on her shoulder. Let's see if you can get the kit back by yourself, he whispers in her ear, his hot breath against her neck pissing her off even more. She quickly did a heavenly spin, but the fox was already gone. She looked around for him but saw nothing, thinking that he wanted to play games but she would comply. She took a few steps forward but stopped immediately when she heard his footsteps behind her. She quickly turned and blocked the blow he sent her way. You're very good at blocking, and you have a very keen sense of hearing. He smirks and she flings him back. I don't need your compliments, she says as she rushes at him. She dodges his oncoming right jab and sends a fist to his left. She hits him in his side, but as she goes to pull away, her hand gets stuck in his emanating chakra coat. What the? She punched back into the ground and the fox stares at her a moment as she gets to her feet. I see, so you're cheating by having a protective coat that allows you to pummel your opponents if they attack you physically. I never said I wouldn't cheat. You forget, honey, I don't want to go back in that cage, so I will do whatever necessary to stay out, even if that means my kid's lover in the process. Kyubi growls as he charges in at Hinata. In her only attempt, she keeps dodging his fists, trying to make a plan while doing so, but Kyubi keeps switching up his attacks, not giving her time to think. Don't ever call me honey again. She quickly punctures his arm and it goes limp. He smirks at her as he shoves a knee in her stomach, which in turn drops her to her knees, her hand resting now on the Kyubi's waist instead of where it had punctured his arm. Her arm falls to her side as she slowly looks up at Kyubi. I'll stop you, she groans lightly as the Kyubi kneels in front of her. Hinata Hyuga, heiress to the Hyuga clan, I'm sorry it had to end this way, I mean you could have been a wonderful bride. Kyubi smirks evilly as he grabs her by the hair and pulls her up to her feet. She screams at this from the pain as she tries to pull his hand off with both her hands only to fail. Kyubi then shoves a fist deep into her stomach, making her go limp, and he tosses her on the ground. Kyubi, Hinata groans as she tries to sit up only to have Kyubi's foot land solid on her chest, shoving her back down. He kneels down and runs his nails over the C he had inflicted on her earlier. My fair girl, you certainly are willing to S for the brat. I guess in the end you'll see that even though you S for him, he won't come back. You taste wonderful, he smirks down at her. I hope you rot in hell. She growls at him, her eyes very angry. I already did 6 times, my dear, it wouldn't affect me if I went again. Kyubi smiles evilly as he digs his nails into her thigh, making her cry out in pain and making him feel joy at her screams. No longer shall I sit back while the runt does everything. No longer shall I sit in the darkness unable to see or hear what is going on. He runs his hand up from her right thigh to her waist. I won't let him have fun while I stay in the dark. He freezes when he feels another presence behind him and quickly gets to his feet and turns to them to find Desara standing there, her hand glowing a brilliant white and a smirk on her face. You messed with my student, I'm going to have to seal you up again. She smirks at Kyubi, who only laughs at her statement. You seal me up again? You've got to be kidding, woman, there's no way to redo that seal. He states, proudly unaware of the new seal in her hand. But this isn't the same seal, that's the best part. Desara smirks as Kyubi's face turns serious about the matter and he watches her closely. This one will stop you from breaking the seal, she states as she begins to circle Kyubi and Hinata. She focuses one eye on Kyubi and the other on Hinata to see if she's okay. I won't let you use your little seal, Kyubi says as he watches Desara closely. Watch me. I'll get it done in the next 5 minutes. If I exceed the time, I guess I'll have to take a few hits to get it done. Desara charges in at Kyubi, luring him away from Hinata as Neji hurries out and helps his cousin to her feet and helping her limp away, but Kyubi notices and charges after them, tripping Neji, but Neji makes Hinata land on him, cushioning her fall. Kyubi's arms go limp as does his body and he drops to the ground. The chakra disappears and when it is gone, Naruto lays there limp and pale. Take her inside, Desara orders, and Neji quickly takes Hinata inside. Damn demon, she growls as she lifts Naruto up on her back and heads inside. He awoke to find Dasara hovering over him as if she were checking something. At first he didn't realize his shirt was gone till he felt Dasara's cold hands touch his stomach, which in turn freaked him out. He watched closely as she examined the seal, not noticing he was awake until he moved his hand. She quickly looked up at his face to find the sadness and anger she thought she'd find. "I see you're awake," she whispers. She goes back to examining the seal but looks at him once again as he began to speak. "He came out, didn't he?" Naruto whispers, trying to keep his voice low like hers, for he knew she spoke quietly for a reason. "Yes, he did, but I formatted the seal and now he'll never be able to come out again unless you use the summoning jutsu." "Did anyone get hurt?" Naruto asked quietly. Dasara bowed her head at this, unable to speak. "Dasara-sensei, did they get hurt?" he whispers once again, but a hint of fear was in it this time. "Yes, you attacked Toma first. He was fine after we got him inside and patched him up. He's already up and training again with Lee." She whispers and slowly looks up at him. "But I was too late for Hinata. Kyuubi did a number on her for defying him and he almost got Neji also," she whispers, but Hinata is still resting and Neji is watching her while Guy trains the other two. "I hurt her," Naruto whispers and turns his face away from her, looking out the window at the sunshine and the small dove on the branch. "Don't blame yourself, Naruto, it was his doing. Not yours and you know it," she says and gets to her feet. Besides, Hinata is the one who decided to face him. She made the choice of risking everything to save you, so if you blame anyone in the end you should blame me. Naruto quickly looks up at Dasara to find her facing away from him. "I didn't see the weakness in the seal and that's my fault. I should have tried to study it first on non-accepting demons." "Dasara-sensei," Naruto starts only to be see-off as she speaks again. "Naruto, I've repaired it again. It'd be best if you rested a while before you went off and did things on your own." And she left the room at that, leaving him alone in silence. "You know you had us all worried," a voice said from the door. Naruto quickly looked to the voice to find Neji standing there with his arms folded across his chest. She was really worried. Yeah, she's delusional still, but she still doesn't stop worrying and thinking you're still as him. She worries too much. Naruto looks down at his lap. "As do you," Neji says as he wanders in and sits in a seat next to Naruto's bedside. "You know that, right?" "Yeah, but she still worries more." "I beg to differ, I bet you worry much more than her. And I'm willing to place a bet on that," Neji states, and Naruto laughs at this and they smile at each other. "I'm sorry about the other day." "You don't need to apologize, Neji, I shouldn't have went off on you. I mean, Toma was fine and I guess I just lost it," Naruto says as Neji gets to his feet. "Naruto, you probably went off since the Kyuubi was influencing you. So look at it as the Kyuubi's fault, not yours," Neji says and looks out the window, then back to Naruto. "Well, I must go train with Lee and Toma. Rest up, Naruto, you have to train to be the Hokage after all." Neji smiles as he exits quietly, leaving Naruto alone. Naruto sighs and gets to his feet. He slowly goes to the window and looks out and around at the small town they were staying in. It was on the edge of the cloud territory as to not put Hinata or Neji in danger during their stay, but they had already failed at that. "I should go see Hinata-chan," Naruto whispers and disappears out the door. He was scared to see what he had done to her. He understood that the fox did it, but it was his fault for letting the damn thing out. He slowly approached the door to her room to find it closed. He took a deep breath before carefully and slowly opening the door and stepping inside. He closed the door gently behind him as he scanned the room for the one he was looking for. He found her easily. She lay quiet and still on the bed with the sunshine hidden mostly by the drapes. He slowly approached her and sat in the seat Neji had been sitting in before he had come and seen Naruto. Naruto looked her over. He couldn't see the damage done to her thigh, but he saw her arm and his gaze was locked on her cheek. "Hinata-chan," he whispers, and the pale woman on the bed's hand moved ever so slightly. He smiled from the reaction and gently took Hinata's hand, which had been tense, but she now calmed. She opened her eyes slowly as she let them adjust to the somewhat dark room. Her eyes focused on his face and the sad smile he gave her. "Naruto-kun," she whispers as she slowly sits up. He goes to push her back down so she can rest, but his hand is shooed away by hers. "I'm fine, please don't worry." She looked up at him. He was back to normal and the demon was sealed again, but she couldn't understand why she still felt so afraid. "Are you okay? I mean, the seal must have hurt." No, I was asleep through the pain, Naruto said as he watched her slowly get to her feet. When she did, his eyes gazed down and found the bandages on her leg. He could tell she was having a hard time standing from the injury as he gently touched the bandages. Don't worry, it isn't permanent. It should be fine in the next day or two. She smiles warmly at him. He looks up to find the warm smile and he can't help but relax. Now you should try to get used to training again. I mean, you can't be Hokage while sitting up here, can you? She goes to the door and turns to face him. He watched her carefully as she stood there. She was trying to be strong not only for herself but for him. They walked out and down the hall hand in hand to find Toma outside kicking the S out of Lee again. Naruto smiled as the day went on. It had been 4 days since the incident and Hinata was back to normal and practicing her dodging as Lee threw punches and kicks at her. Toma was teaching Neji at the moment about the chakra bomb as Naruto sat on the grass watching. Dasara and Guy said they would be gone in town for the next few days, Guy doing some recon for Tsunade and Dasara getting supplies and checking on the Cloud's activities. It's true that they had been improving, but something was missing from the whole picture. Okay, that's enough, Hinata said as she landed on the ground in front of Lee. She brushed herself off and smiled up at Lee only to get his trademark smile and a thumbs up. She laughs lightly at his thumbs up as Toma comes flying out of nowhere and S into Lee, sending both of them rolling on the ground. Hinata watched as Neji came running out and quickly helped Lee to his feet as Naruto helped Toma. Sorry you guys, we were practicing and I told Neji to do the bomb, and I got hit by the impact, Toma said, rubbing his head lightly and looking at the others. Hinata looked as if she were to start laughing and Naruto turned away trying to hide what he wanted to do. That's okay comrade, we understand that you wished to practice and that's only natural, Lee said as he brushed himself off and looked to the others. Toma-san, when will I be able to practice with you? Well, I have an idea, Toma says looking at Hinata and Naruto who were now facing him with straight faces. I'm going to take Lee and Neji into the woods for the next few days while Dasara-sensei and Guy-sensei are gone to train them. While we're gone, Hinata can teach Naruto about the diplomatic things of a leader so he can be a good Hokage, Toma says and looks at Hinata and Naruto, then at Lee and Neji. Okay. Yeah, that should work out fine, Neji says as he crosses his arms across his chest. As long as those two don't try anything. Neji glares at Naruto and Hinata only to get a blush from Hinata and a grunt from Naruto. We won't, Neji-ni-san. Hinata smiles at Neji who smiles in turn. Lee jumps up with a fist in the air ready to exclaim something when Toma starts to talk. Okay, Lee, Neji, go start packing some things for the next 3 days, Toma said before disappearing inside. Lee walks in after him, his head bowed in defeat and denial. Neji looks Naruto up and down and then disappears inside, leaving the two diplomats alone. Well, that was a little awkward, Naruto states as he looks to Hinata. She smiles warmly at him as she heads inside after her cousin. Well, at least I get to be alone with Hinata-chan, he says as he heads inside to help Toma pack the tent for the trip. They headed out that night ready for the training that would take place in the next few days. 4 days alone with her and he already didn't know what to do. He paced around outside as Hinata gathered the materials for the test she would put him through. He knew nothing of what he should know about the whole diplomatic society. Yeah, he was to take the Hokage test when he returned, but he knew nothing of the leader part of it, and Hinata was very determined to get him to get it in the next few days. Naruto-kun, I've got the books ready, she yelled out her window to him. When he heard her voice, he quickly stopped and turned towards the house. He sighed and slowly sulked inside. The next few days were going to suck in his head, but he didn't understand that one-on-one teaching did have its advantages. Hinata-chan, we will have time to do some physical training still, right? He asked the Hyuga sitting on the floor near the window. Probably not. I mean, you have a lot to learn in only these next 3 days and I plan on getting you to be the best leader ever in that short time period, she said as she flipped the page of the book she was holding. Take a seat. She pats the spot next to her and he slowly sits down Indian style. She immediately handed him a large book which was at least 5 pounds. He raised an eyebrow and looked up at her to find her smiling, then he looked back down at the book. I have to read it all, he asked with a hint of fear and sadness in his voice. Yes, you need to read all of that one first, then I'll test you on it. You need to read through all 12 volumes before the time period exceeds. She gets to her feet and heads towards the door. Where are you going? He asked as his eyes followed her. Well, I have to send a letter to Dasara-sensei about her coming back. I don't want her to interrupt your learning, so I'm going to ask her to stay in town with Yuri. She said as she left the room, leaving him alone with all 12 volumes of the books. I don't want to. Naruto whines loudly and throws the book against the wall. He quickly gets to his feet, prepared to run for dear life before Hinata came back. He went to the window and quickly made a shadow clone, who in turn picked up the book and began to read as Naruto escaped out the window. Hinata returned shortly and looked at the clone. She raised an eyebrow at the weird chakra readings and walked up to the clone. He can't fool me, why does he even try? She goes up to the clone and hits it in the back of the neck, making it disappear. She smirks as she looks outside, using her Byakugan to track his movements as he hurries through the woods. Day 1, the running Hokage and his return. Hinata smirked as she went inside and began to read. He returned later that night as he quietly snuck into his room. It was very dark since the moon was hidden behind the clouds at the moment. As he went to shut the door, he heard someone near the window and quickly looked to the window to find the moon slowly shining in, revealing Hinata standing by the window. You are high, Hinata-chan, he whispered as he slowly began to reach for the handle. She saw this and smiled warmly, reassuring him that nothing would happen, and at this he slowly began to walk inside. Moments later, Hinata disappeared and was behind him, blocking the door. He quickly turned to her to find her smirking. You know, skipping out on training is off limits, she says as she slowly looked up at him. He looked confused yet terrified by the way she was smiling at him. She thought about what she'd do, but then he finally spoke up. Hinata-chan, it's not like I wanted to skip out because of you, it's because of those damn books. I don't want to read them all. I don't even want to read one, he says, and she smiles lightly. Sorry Naruto-kun, you have to read them and I have just the method to help you. You do? He asks quietly and she slowly approaches him, but he stands his ground. She gently touches his cheek in admiration, but then she quickly turns him around and grabs his wrists. You see, since you skipped out on it, I have to keep you up till you read the whole first volume, she whispers in his ear. He hated this, he felt so weak when she was like this. She sounded, smelled, and acted like a seductress, and it was him. Hinata-chan, why can't I start tomorrow? He asks, and she makes him sit on the ground. Because I wanted you to start today, she whispers and ties his hands behind his back. She sits at the foot of the bed and leans against it for support as she sat the book in front of him and smiled. Go ahead and start reading, your quiz starts as soon as you're done, she says, and watches as his eyes slowly gaze down at the book, then slowly look up at her. He tries to plead no with his eyes, but she ignores it. You're mean, Hinata-chan, he groans as he tries to free himself. I'm not mean. I'm persistent. She smiles and watches as he finally gives up and begins to read the book sitting on the ground. He wanted to break out and run away until Dasara came back or Toma came back, but he knew that wouldn't happen. He was trapped here with his persistent lover and these damn heavy books. He awoke to the book about halfway through and Hinata fast asleep in front of him. He smiled at the sight of her, even though she was a little harsh the night before, she still looked like an angel. He thought about what happened the night before and how his angel had made him so weak and vulnerable with only a few words as he began to try to get free once more like he had done last night. He finally got his hands free after a good 10 minutes of struggling and grunting. He was happy when he could see his hands and flex them to get the strain off of his wrists, even though they now hurt from rope burn from the struggle. He got to his feet and stretched before he went over to Hinata and leaned over her. He then scooped her up into his arms and carried her to his bed and tucked her in nice and safe. He looked down at the books on the floor and sighed at the sight. How was he to learn from all 12 books in only 2 days? Well, since I know I'm not getting out of this, I might as well read them, he groaned at his statement and slowly picked up the open book he started last night and sat on the window sill. He sat there for hours reading the book and he still hadn't gotten it done. His stomach growled finally after the 3rd hour and he looked up at the clock to see the time, which was noon exactly. You know, you should really eat something, Hinata said as she got up and stretched in the sunlight. She smiled at him with the book in his lap and slowly went to the door and opened it. I'll get us some lunch, She smiled back at him then disappeared out the door. Wow, she's a lot different than last night, he whispers then thinks back to what Jiraiya had said about girls' mood changes. Maybe she was just having one of those days. Training others was very boring. Toma groaned as he watched Lee try the speed technique he had taught him as he watched Neji try the new power chakra blade. He was officially bored and wanted to go back to the hotel. Yeah, he understood that Naruto had to be alone with his teacher to learn anything related to books, but he was alone with Hinata and Toma didn't like that. In the meantime, Toma had sent Sakura a letter along with a package. He smiled to himself as he imagined her face as she opened the gift. The hair comb was beautiful with crystallized cherry blossoms and little green leaves and vines. Dasara had told everyone about the letter Sunid had sent about the festival they would be home for, and that's what made him want to buy the present for his girlfriend. Toma-sensei. I did it, I did it. Lee cheered as he quickly appeared in front of Toma. Toma just stared up at him from his sitting position and groaned. Neji watched as Lee celebrated and Toma ignored, thinking for a moment that Toma was his own twin. Lee calmed down and start practicing it again. Toma said as he got to his feet and began to walk back to camp, ignoring the aggravating Lee. He couldn't wait to see Konoha for the first time. 3 months, that was all that was left till the real fun began. He wanted to be a teacher, he really did, but Lee was a little too much energy for him. You know, once we get to Konoha you might have to deal with him every day. Neji says as he follows Toma. But there I have more people to pay attention to. Toma says and Neji only shrugs to his comment. Toma looks to Neji and lifts a brow. Won't I? I don't know, I mean we don't know who all we're training or anything. Neji says as he folds his arms across his chest and closes his eyes. All I know is I can't wait to be back home, I miss her already. I see, well I miss my girl too. Toma smiles and Neji laughs lightly. I forgot you were with Sakura-chan, well when we get back we should celebrate with them. I know Sakura would love to hang loose for once and Tenten would love being able to go somewhere for a change. Is Tenten locked up? Toma looks at Neji as if he were confused. The main branch wants to keep Tenten and my heir safe, so she goes nowhere without an escort unless I'm taking her out. Neji says and looks at Toma. She usually goes with Sakura to the hospital to help out there instead of being stuck home all day. Well, that's nice of her, she must have been the girl Sakura-chan was talking about in her letters lately. Yeah, that has to be her. Neji says and looks forward down the path to the camp. Breakfast was great. Naruto smiled as he set the empty plate down that had once been stacked with food. He smiled up at Hinata, who was sitting on the floor across from him. Her food was gone also, but she only had a little compared to him. She smiled up at him brightly as he began to read again. He was finally on the second volume and he barely passed the test on the first. He was pretty scared at whether he would be able to pass the second or not. I'm going to go clean these up. Try not to work too hard on the books. Hinata says as she takes his plate and hers and exits the room. It's definitely one of those days for her. He whispers as she disappears from sight. He gets up and sits on the window sill once again. He reads for a few minutes then looks out the window imagining being down there and training. He went back to reading after a few minutes of memorizing the past things he did and sighed. Hinata walked in moments later and set down 2 glasses and a pitcher, most likely to last them till dinner. It was already starting to get dark out as Naruto watched Hinata light a few candles for light which reflected off her skin as if she were glowing. He began to remember the day at the waterfall when he caught her dancing on it alone. Flashback. He heard someone at the water and wondered who it was. He had gone on a walk since he was bored at the camp since Kiba and Akamaru were asleep and Shino didn't talk much. The waterfall was peacefully and he slowly hid behind the bushes looking out over the water to find a beautiful girl dancing on top the water. He watched closely as she danced and sighed at her beauty. Yeah, he was only 13 but Naruto loved the look of the girl on the water. After a few more minutes he got to his feet and began towards the water. Excuse me, who are, he started to speak but he stopped as soon as he slipped on a wet rock and fell in the water. The girl quickly ran off as Naruto rubbed his head from the fall. He looked around for the girl but found no one. She had run away from him and it made him sad. Little did he know that she was hiding in the bushes pulling her clothes on. End flashback. Naruto slowly snapped back to reality as he noticed that Hinata was no longer lighting candles and she was now speaking to him. He watched her as she began to speak softly to him. You know Naruto-kun, I don't think you need to work all day and night, you should get them done in no time as soon as you get into them. She says as she sits down on his bed with a scroll in her hand. He looks up at her, then eyes the scroll a second. His gaze then slowly lifts from the scroll to her eyes. What's that? He asked and began eyeing the scroll again and then looks back up at her face to find her smiling. It's a scroll I found about some medical things. I told Dasara sensei about it and she told me to study it a while. She opens up the scroll onto the bed and begins to examine it. This piques Naruto's interest and he tries to look over at it and see what she's reading, but she blocks his view. Why can't I see it? Naruto says and gets to his feet. Because it's mine and I don't want you to see it. Hinata quickly rolls up the scroll and hides it behind her back. This ticks Naruto off and he sets the book down. He slowly begins to approach her. Let me see it, Naruto says, and she backs away further onto the bed. No, she says simply, but then he climbs up on the bed. She quickly goes to get off and escape, but he pulls her onto the bed and sits on her waist. Yes, he says and stares down into her eyes. No, she says defiantly and keeps the scroll hidden behind her. Fine then, he says and shrugs his shoulders. Relief flood her when he does this. She thinks to herself as if she were able to get free, but as she goes to wiggle out from under him, he pins her down by the shoulders. Okay, now I'll have to force you to give it to me. He smirks and tries to reach around and grab the scroll, but she quickly tries to pull it away. They wrestle around for a good 5 minutes till he pins her arms down by the wrist with one hand and holds the scroll in the other. Naruto-kun, give it back. She whines and tries to get free to grab the scroll but fails miserably. You know Hina-chan, I love the view from up here. I feel so powerful. He smirks. She frowns up at him and then he frowns. Don't give me that look or I'll have to wipe it off. He states, but she keeps the look on her face. You asked for it. He leans down and touches his lips softly to hers. He smiles down at her when she's no longer frowning at him but smiling softly. Naruto-kun, she whispers gently and watches as his eyes change to a more softer shade of blue. Yeah. He whispers back to her and watches as her hands break free from his weakened grip and rest on his shoulders. He drops the scroll and his hands now rest on the bed beside her, holding him up from falling. Maybe you should forget about the books a while and relax, she whispers, and before she can get an answer from him, his lips meet hers again, but this time it wasn't gentle. It was passionate and loving. Yeah, I think I will, he whispers and smiles down at her. Lee didn't understand where he was when he awoke, only that he was laying on the floor alone and his head hurt like hell. He looked around to find nothing but the afternoon sun shining in on his body. He groaned as he slowly rose to his feet and headed for the door, unaware of the test going on outside. What the? He groaned and watched as Hinata sat across from Naruto Indian style with Toma and Neji standing behind her. He watched as Naruto scribbled down answers as Hinata began asking questions. In a democracy, who has the most power? She asks and Naruto scribbles something down. What is your sole purpose as the leader of the village? She asked when he stopped writing the first answer. As the Hokage, it is your sole duty to do what for the people. He's writing pretty fast, Toma whispered to Neji, who in turn whispered back. It doesn't matter how much he writes, only what he writes, Neji whispered as Lee slowly stumbled out to them. As soon as Hinata spotted him, she shifted slightly away, still aware of what had happened later. Neji raised an eyebrow at this and looked at Lee. Is he testing already? Lee whispered to Toma and Neji. Yes, and be quiet, Toma says as Hinata continues with questions. What 3 people are most likely to be at your side at all times? She asks and Naruto yet again scribbles something down on the paper. You are to write a paper about what the people have decided against, who is to finalize the paper. Some of these questions he should have known beforehand. I mean, I know some of these things aren't in the books she had him read. Neji says and folds his arms across his chest. Why would she do that? Lee asks and looks at Neji, then at Hinata and finally at Toma. Because she knows the testers will do it when it comes to test day. You don't get everything from books, some things you get from experience. Toma says and looks at Neji and Lee. It'd be too simple if you got everything from books alone, and no one likes to make it easy. I'd like the easy way, but I've already had to take a similar test as did Hinata-san. Neji says and Lee and Toma look at him at this statement. You took this test? Toma asks and Neji nods to answer. Hyugas must take and pass a test very similar to become Chunin in the eyes of the main branch. Hinata-san's was much harder than mine though since she is an heir. Neji says as he listens to the questions that Hinata is still asking Naruto. So she's testing him already. Someone says behind Neji, Toma, and Lee. The three turn to the voice to find Dasara standing there with her hands on her hips. Hello Dasara-sensei, Neji says and bows his head slightly then regains his composure as Guy walks up next to Dasara. Guy-sensei. He says simply. Neji, Lee. Guy says and faces Lee. Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee responds to his name and faces Guy. Before a minute the two green suit beasts hug and begin to cry in their normal reunion. Neji sighs at this and turns away to look at Hinata and Naruto. Dasara looks away also but looks at Toma instead. Did anything good happen? She asks and Toma shakes his head no in response. They all stop when they finally hear an exclamation from the blonde sitting on the ground. Done. He yells and quickly gets to his feet with his paper in his right hand. Hinata sighs at this and gets to her feet. She swipes the paper out of his hand and begins to look it over. Naruto and Neji look over her shoulder and she quickly walks away to get them away from her. Neji laughs at this and all the rest of them look to him. When Neji notices that they're all looking at him he stops and clears his throat. Well, I'll be training in the woods, he says quickly and disappears into the trees not wanting to be near the others anymore. Toma shrugs his shoulders and looks at Naruto and Dasara. I guess I'll go train some too, I mean I have nothing better to do. He walks away with his hands in his pockets and walks in the opposite direction of Neji. Lee watches them and looks up at Naruto. Naruto ignores him a minute then looks to him. I'm sorry for what happened today Naruto-san. I just really had to, Lee starts but Naruto sees him off completely. Don't worry about it, I did what was necessary and that was it. Naruto shrugs and looks at Dasara. So Dasara-sensei, how'd it go in town? He asks as he shoves his hands in his pockets. They don't even know that we have two Hyugas on the outskirts. So far they've kept everything down but I'm afraid that they might just be planning something. She says as she folds her arms across her chest. But we only have to stay here less than 4 months. We shouldn't have a problem should we? Naruto asks as he sits down on a stump. Dasara shakes her head no and Naruto watches closely. It wouldn't take them long to put together an attack force to come after us. They only have to say one word. She says and Lee looks at her. One word. Lee asks and watches Dasara closely. He looks to Naruto as he hears Naruto about to speak. Byakugan. Naruto says simply with a little anger behind his voice. He was bored yet again and he had no one to mess around with. Toma sat slowly underneath a tree as he watched the branches blow in the wind. Only a few months to go then he could make a new life as a Konoha shinobi and be with Sakura again. He missed her a little too much in his opinion but Dasara said people get that way when they love someone. He stopped thinking about it when he began to hear the rustling in the bushes. He looked to the bushes wondering if it was his imagination again, like earlier only to find 4 cloud shinobi jump out and surround him. Tell us where the Byakugan wielders are. One of the shinobi demand as Toma slowly looks to who's speaking. And if I don't tell you? He asks as the shinobi slowly circle him. He watches their leader closely as he smirks and pulls out a kunai. I guess I'll have to make you tell me. The cloud shinobi states as the other 3 pull out the kunai and prepare to attack. I wouldn't attack me if I were you. Toma states and closes his eyes. You piss me off and you'll be facing a demon who won't hesitate to rip you to shreds. Toma states but the shinobi ignore him and charge. Toma disappears before they can touch him and the 4 begin to look around for him. Come out we want to play a game with you. One of the cloud shinobi says as he slowly wanders around looking for Toma. I'll play with you, a deep voice says from in the bushes. The shinobi look to the bushes to find 2 big red eyes staring out at them. They watch as the figure emerges and before them stands a large dragon with 10 tails whipping around it. Its black scales glimmer with the little light that comes from the space between the trees. What the? One of the shinobi whisper and back away as the others follow his lead. I told you you'd be facing a demon. Toma walks out beside the dragon and runs a hand along its scales. Meet my demon Jinchuri, he's come to play with you. Toma smirks and the cloud ninja go to run away. No running away from me, Toma says as he does a quick hand signal. Huge rock walls surround the dragon and see off the ninjas' retreat. The walls then expand up and create a cage top so the ninjas can't escape. We only wanted the Byakugan. One of the ninjas cried in fear and Toma smirked at his exclamation. Sorry, but I'm not allowed to let you go near it, he states simply and raises a hand in the air. They hurry to their feet and charge at Toma, who smirks. He does some quick hand signs and puts a hand to his mouth. What are you? One of the ninjas begin to say but stop when black fire comes out of his mouth and wraps around two of the men, frying them so there's only ash left. The other two ninjas look at the remains, then look at Toma. Your turn. Toma smirks and he puts a hand up in the air. Toma looks up at Jinchuri as the walls begin to crumble and disappear. I'll have to report this, he whispers as Jinchuri turns into a black mist and goes back inside of Toma. They attacked you? Naruto asks as he looks towards Toma. He had told them everything, even about Jinchuri coming out to play, but Toma didn't seem relieved. Yeah, and I know that when the others find their bee as they are now, they might do one of two things. Toma says and closes his eyes. He was leaning against a wall with his arms folded across his chest as Naruto sat on the arm of the chair Hinata sat in, Dasara sat in the other chair, and Neji and Lee were on the couch. What might those two things be, Toma-kun? Hinata asks her teammate, only to get a sigh from him, and he slowly opens his eyes to look at everyone. Either they'll freak out and never bother us again, he says and looks at Neji, then to Hinata. Or they might bring on a full-scale attack and ambush us with all their might. He watches as Hinata's face turns into a face of concern and Dasara only blow out hot air. I knew this would happen, this is why we came here last, Dasara whispers and everyone looks to her. So what's the plan? Neji asks and watches the others closely. If they punch first, we'll only have to fight back 10 times stronger, Dasara says simply and looks at all the jonin in the room. So go get some rest so we don't have any people tired for training tomorrow, she says as she rises to her feet and walks out of the room and up the stairs. Hinata looks at everyone and gets to her feet. Don't worry everyone, we won't lose. Hinata smiles warmly at everyone before she follows Dasara upstairs. Hinata-chan's right. We'd never lose to those weak bastards. Naruto cheers as he jumps to his feet in excitement. Neji shakes his head as Naruto begins to ramble on about all of their strengths and about strategies. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.